The day I walked down the aisle alone, 3 empty chairs were waiting for me, a silent reminder that some people only show up when there's something in it for them. But that day, under the lights and whispers, I promised myself this would be the last time I ever begged to be seen. The satin whispered against the floor as I shifted in front of the mirror, trying to steady my breath. The bridal suite smelled faintly of roses and hairspray. My makeup artist had outdone herself. My reflection almost didn't look like me. The woman in the mirror had perfect curls, steady eyes, and a smile that didn't tremble. I wished she felt as confident as she looked. My phone lay face up on the vanity, its black screen cutting through the soft glow of vanity bulbs. No messages, no missed calls. I had checked it 14 times in the past 20 minutes. Nothing from Mom. Nothing from Dad. Not even from my brother, Logan. A knock came gentle, practiced. Caroline, Martha, my wedding planner, peeked her head in, her voice wrapped in polite tension. It's time. Time. The word landed like a weight. I took one more look at my reflection and whispered to the woman staring back, "Let's not cry." Then I picked up my bouquet, the white roses trembling in my hands like my pulse. The garden doors opened, flooding the suite with late afternoon light. The music began, soft strings threading through the air. As I stepped into view, 90 guests rose to their feet. And there they were, 3 empty chairs in the front row, waiting, accusing, unforgiven. A few guests whispered behind their hands. I could almost hear the sympathy in their eyes. Poor girl, no parents here. The pity in their smiles burned worse than any insult. But then Ethan, standing at the altar, steady, his eyes locked on mine like an anchor. Every nerve in me reached for him. Each step forward became a rebellion, against absence, against history, against the quiet little voice that still asked, why wasn't I enough? When I reached him, Ethan took my hands, his grip firm and grounding. "I'm here," he whispered, "just for me. We're enough." The world around us blurred for a heartbeat. His words were a promise stronger than any vow that would follow. And yet, as the officiant began to speak, my mind betrayed me. It drifted not to the vows but back in time, to a living room filled with trophies that weren't mine. I was 8, standing in front of the fireplace while Mom and Dad admired Logan's newest debate trophy. They positioned it just right on the mantel, taking pictures from every angle. My art certificate, my little victory, sat forgotten in the kitchen drawer. I had shown it to them that morning. "The teacher said I have a real gift," I remember saying. Mom barely looked up from the stew pot. "That's nice, honey." Dad had ruffled my hair absently later. "Logan needs more support. He's going places." And Mom, her favorite dagger, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Even now, decades later, the echo of that line felt as sharp as broken glass. The ceremony pressed on. My vows trembled at first, then grew steadier as I spoke. I choose a future built on being seen not for what we achieve, but for who we are. Only Ethan understood the hidden meaning beneath those words. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I could almost feel something loosen inside me. A thread, long stretched and frayed, finally snapped. Ethan's mother pulled me into a hug. "You're one of us now, dear." Her warmth, the kind of effortless affection I'd never known, nearly broke me. Under the string lights of the reception, Ethan twirled me across the dance floor. The music swelled, laughter surrounded us, and for fleeting moments, I forgot the 3 empty chairs, the unanswered calls, the cold silence from home. But when I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall, a perfect bride smiling on the outside, I saw it, the hollowness behind the sparkle. Because no matter how bright the lights, some shadows follow you down the aisle. The reception shimmered like a dream I'd once imagined as a little girl. The fairy lights strung through the vineyard trees, the clink of glasses, laughter carried on the wind. But somewhere inside that golden noise, there was a quiet ache that wouldn't let go. Ethan's family had shown up in full force. His mother danced with him, his father toasted us twice, and his cousins filled the dance floor like a celebration should. I smiled, I laughed, I danced, but every time I turned toward the crowd, my eyes betrayed me, searching for faces that weren't there. 3 empty seats had turned into 3 ghosts. Martha, the planner, brushed past me at one point, murmuring, "Everything's perfect, Caroline." I nodded, though we both knew it wasn't. At our table, Ethan leaned in and said softly, "You don't owe them this pain." "I know," I said, "but knowing and believing are two different things." For years, I'd been trained to chase scraps of their approval, like a starving child begging at a feast. Every good grade, every promotion, every headline, I'd mailed them links and photos that went unanswered. The DJ changed the song to something slow and sweet. Ethan pulled me to the dance floor. As we swayed, he whispered, "You did everything right. They chose to miss this." I buried my face against his shoulder, breathing him in cedarwood, champagne, and safety. For a brief second, I let myself imagine Mom watching from the crowd, tears in her eyes, Dad proud in his tux. But the image shattered as quickly as it formed, replaced by the echo of her voice from 3 days before the wedding. "We'll try, sweetie. Logan's firm has an event that weekend." She'd said it like she was declining a movie invitation, not missing her only daughter's wedding. Later that night, Sarah, my college roommate, clinked her glass and stood. "To Caroline," she began, her smile wide and fierce, "for proving that family isn't always blood, it's who shows up for you." A murmur rippled through the tables. People nodded, lifted their glasses. I laughed too loudly, too suddenly, and then, unexpectedly, tears rose up, hot and heavy. Sarah's eyes met mine. She mouthed, "You're not invisible anymore." Something in me cracked, not painfully, but cleanly, like a bone finally setting right after years of misalignment. When the music faded, I slipped away to the edge of the terrace, where the vineyard rolled into shadow. My phone glowed in my palm. I unlocked it. Still, nothing. No, congratulations. No, proud of you. Not even a lazy emoji. Ethan found me there, the glow of the phone lighting half my face. Still nothing? I shook my head. He took the phone from my hands and turned it face down on the railing. "They missed something beautiful today," he said simply. I stared out at the field, row upon row of vines, neat and identical. My parents would have loved that. Order, control, everything in its proper place. I used to believe love was like that too, earned by effort, maintained by perfection, but Ethan was teaching me something different. Love didn't have to be proven, it just had to be present. Later, when the last song ended and the guests filtered out, I stood in the quiet aftermath of petals and laughter fading into the night. I thought of all the times I'd waited for them before school plays, graduation, my first gallery show, and realized something I hadn't dared admit out loud. Maybe it wasn't that they forgot, maybe they just didn't care to remember. I exhaled, long and slow, watching the breath vanish into the cold night air. Ethan came up beside me, his jacket draped over my shoulders. "Ready to go?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally am." That night, lying beside him in the honeymoon suite, I stared at the ceiling while the world outside fell silent. "I kept thinking," I whispered, "if I just became more, someone they could brag about, they'd love me." Ethan turned to face me. "You don't need to earn love, Caroline. You just need to stop giving it to people who can't return it." The truth of it sat heavy, then strangely freeing. I pressed my face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and real. Somewhere between the rhythm of it and the silence beyond, I decided that from now on, I would build my own kind of family. Not the one I was born into. The one I'd choose. 2 years later, the smell of espresso and ambition filled my office as I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, watching the final confirmation flash across my monitor. Acquisition of Crescent Motion Studio finalized, $21 million. The number looked surreal, like something borrowed from someone else's life. 5 years ago, I'd been working out of a shared co-working space, eating instant noodles and editing promo reels until sunrise. Now, my name sat on legal documents beside investors I'd only read about in Forbes. The door burst open and my team spilled in laughing, shouting, champagne bottles in hand. "To Caroline," shouted Jen, my creative director, raising her glass. "The woman who built something from nothing while certain people weren't looking." The room erupted in cheers. I smiled, but part of me still flinched at that phrase, "while certain people weren't looking." Because that was the truth, wasn't it? The people who should have seen me never did. We toasted, laughed, and for an hour, I let myself celebrate. The screens glowed with the company logo, cameras flashing as someone recorded a short clip for the announcement post. I caught my reflection in the glass wall, confident, centered, successful, and yet a shadow lingered at the edges of my mind. When the laughter faded, I checked my phone out of habit. Notifications poured in from colleagues, clients, and journalists. But the names that mattered most were missing, as always. Then curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I opened Instagram. There he was, Logan, my brother. His latest post, proud to continue the family tradition. The photo nearly stole my breath. Mom and Dad stood beside him and his wife, Hannah, glowing under the headline Westridge Academy fundraiser. The twins, my nieces smiling in their plaid uniforms, Dad's hand on Logan's shoulder. Mom beaming like royalty. Family tradition continues, the caption read. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Third generation at Westridge. Do they even remember I exist? Swipe. Another photo. Their Hawaiian vacation, first class, ocean view. The same week I'd been finalizing a funding round alone in a fluorescent-lit office. Swipe again. Dad's retirement party. Smiling faces, speeches, Logan at the podium. My absence, once again, invisible. I zoomed in on the background, the luxury home. The kind of place where nothing sold for under $2 million. According to distant cousins, my parents had been propping Logan up for years, pouring retirement money into his mortgage, his law firm, his image. All that generosity, all that pride. For him, for the first time that day, champagne lost its sparkle. Jen touched my arm. We lost you for a second, she said softly. I blinked, forcing a smile. Just checking messages. She grinned. You should be proud, you've done the impossible. I know, I said. It just took a while for everyone else to notice. When the team left for the after-party, I stayed behind, staring out the window as the city lights began to pulse awake. Portland looked almost tender from this height, streets like veins, people like thoughts moving through them. I thought about every moment I'd spent trying to earn a place in my own family, the scholarships, the awards, the silent phone calls home that ended in awkward small talk. I'd been trying to prove something to people who never bothered to look. That night, in the stillness of my penthouse apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my financial dashboard. The digits glowed in cool blue light, numbers that could buy anything except the love I had chased my entire life. Maybe that was the point. Maybe I didn't need their love anymore. Maybe it was time they learned what it felt like to look up and finally see me. 3 days after the acquisition, I bought the Porsche. It was a metallic gray Taycan, sleek and silent as a secret. The dealership smelled of leather and glass polish, and when I signed the final papers, the salesman grinned like I'd just joined some private club of the powerful. Maybe I had. As I drove it off the lot, the electric hum of the engine vibrated through me. It wasn't about showing off, it was about something deeper. Proof that I'd built something no one could take from me, something that didn't come from family handouts or approval. I parked the car in my driveway, the late sunlight glinting off the chrome. For once, I didn't think of my parents. I just thought of freedom. On a whim, I snapped a photo. The caption was simple. Dreams realized. No hashtags, no explanation, just that. I didn't expect anything. And for 3 days, I got exactly that silence. Until my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 5 years. Mom. For a full minute, I stared at the screen. My heart beat slow and heavy, like it was trying to prepare me. Then I answered. Hello? Caroline, she said, sharp, businesslike, that same tone she used when I was 10 and had forgotten piano practice. We need to talk. My throat tightened. About what? There's a situation. Financial issues. We're having a family meeting tomorrow. In the background, I heard Dad's voice, low but commanding. Tell her it's important. I almost laughed. 5 years of silence, not a word for my wedding, my business, or my success. And now, suddenly, it was important. Tomorrow at 2, I said. I'll be there. Then I hung up before she could respond. That night, Ethan found me in the kitchen, standing barefoot in front of the open fridge, staring at nothing. They called, I said simply. His brows lifted. Let me guess, the Porsche post? I nodded. Suddenly there's a family meeting. Apparently, they're in financial trouble. He set down his coffee, leaning against the counter. You don't owe them anything. I know. My voice was calm, too calm. But I need to hear it from them. I need to see their faces when they realize I'm not the same person they left behind. Ethan smiled softly, the way he did when he was proud but worried at the same time. Remember who you are. Don't let them rewrite the story. I won't. Before bed, I opened my laptop to check emails. Naomi Blake, my first investor and mentor, had sent a short message. Your worth isn't measured by those who couldn't see it. I read it 3 times before closing the lid. The next morning, I woke before dawn. My therapist's words echoed in my mind from last week's session. Boundaries aren't punishments, Caroline, they're protection. I repeated it under my breath as I got ready. Navy pantsuit, polished heels, steady hands. When I stepped into the garage, the Porsche waited under a beam of sunlight, its paint catching gold like armor. I traced my fingers along the hood and whispered, "Let's go make history." The drive to my parents' house took 40 minutes, long enough for memories to claw their way back. Birthdays they'd forgotten. Holidays I'd spent alone. Phone calls that ended with, "We'll talk soon," and never came. As I turned onto their street, I caught myself gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. Their house looked the same: white colonial columns, manicured hedges, perfect symmetry. But I wasn't the same girl who used to pull into that driveway hoping for approval. This time, I wasn't coming home. I was arriving on my own terms. Before stepping out, I glanced at my phone. A new text from Ethan. Remember who you are. Call me if you need extraction. I smiled. Not this time, I whispered. Then I opened the car door, heels clicking on the pavement, the metallic gray Porsche gleaming like a mirror of everything I'd become. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, gloriously in control. The front door opened before I even reached the porch. My parents stood there like gatekeepers to a world I no longer belonged to. Dad's eyes flicked past me to the Porsche in the driveway, his face tightening in a way that looked almost like approval, but wasn't. You've done well for yourself, he said, his tone dry, transactional. Not hello, not we missed you. Just a financial assessment. Yes, I replied evenly. I have. Mom's smile was brittle, the kind that cracked under pressure. Come in, dear. We have a lot to discuss. The house smelled the same: lemon polish, coffee, and nostalgia gone sour. Every photograph on the wall told a story that didn't include me. Logan's wedding, his law school graduation, his daughters in matching Christmas dresses. Not one photo of my own milestones. Not one memory that proved I'd ever existed here. They led me into the dining room. The same mahogany table, the same chandelier humming faintly overhead. Logan and his wife Hannah were already seated. Hannah's smile was professional, her posture perfect. Logan just looked irritated, like this whole thing was an inconvenience. Caroline, he gave a curt nod. It's been a while. 5 years, I said, taking the seat across from him. But who's counting? Dad cleared his throat, slipping into his CEO voice, the one he used to command boardrooms, not families. Let's get straight to business. The word business made me want to laugh. Of course this was business. It always was. He pushed a folder across the table. Loan documents, already filled out. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, playing her role perfectly. It's foreclosure, Caroline, she said softly. Logan's mortgage is 3 months behind. The twins' tuition hasn't been paid for the semester. We've done all we can, but you need my help, I finished for her. Her lips trembled, as if the honesty hurt. We're family. We help each other. I let the silence stretch until it grew uncomfortable. Logan's jaw flexed. We're not asking for charity, just a loan. The interest rate's fair. Dad chimed in. Think about your nieces. They shouldn't suffer because of financial setbacks. My laugh was quiet, sharp. You mean the nieces I've never met? The ones you didn't invite me to their birthdays? Mom flinched. Caroline, please, don't make this personal. How else should I make it? I asked. It was personal when you missed my graduation, personal when you ignored my wedding, personal when I launched a company, and none of you cared enough to call. Logan slammed his palm on the table. You always have to turn everything into a speech, don't you? This is why we stopped inviting you. You make everything about you. I leaned forward, calm but cold. You stopped inviting me because my existence made you uncomfortable, because I built something without your permission. Dad's jaw clenched. That's not fair, Caroline. No, I said softly. Fair would have been you showing up. I could feel my pulse steadying, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat finally syncing with truth. I stood, smoothing my blazer, and looked each of them in the eye. You didn't come to my wedding. You didn't come to my life. But now that I have something worth taking, suddenly I'm family again. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in Dad's eyes. Logan shifted in his chair, losing the arrogance he'd arrived with. Mom reached out as if to touch my hand, but I stepped back. Family, I said quietly, isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters. And you didn't. The ticking of the wall clock filled the silence between us. You're making a mistake, Dad said finally, his voice hardening. No, I said, gathering my purse. I'm correcting one. As I walked toward the door, I could feel their eyes burning into my back, confusion, pride, panic, all tangled together. But beneath it all, something else. Fear. They needed me now. And for once, I had the power to decide what happened next. I stood at the threshold of the dining room, my pulse steady as a drumbeat. For years I'd walked into this house feeling like a child, defensive, desperate, small. Not today. Today I carried something they could never understand. Freedom backed by purpose. Sit down, Caroline, Dad said, gesturing to the chair like a CEO dismissing a junior employee. I didn't move. No, you've said what you wanted. Now, you can listen. Logan exhaled sharply. Oh, for God's sake, just sign the papers. You've got the money, you're hoarding it while your family suffers. Hannah reached across the table, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. The girls ask about you all the time, you know. They wonder why Aunt Caroline doesn't visit. I smiled thinly. Tell them the truth, because Aunt Caroline stopped showing up for people who never showed up for her. The words hit like a slap. For the first time in my life, no one interrupted me. Dad leaned back in his chair, his voice measured. You're being emotional. We're asking for what's reasonable. Family helps family. I tilted my head. Did family help me when I was paying rent out of scholarship money while you funded Logan's third car? Mom's voice trembled. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. I reached into my briefcase, the one they'd assumed contained a checkbook, and placed a single crisp document on the table. This, I said, sliding it toward them, is my answer. Dad frowned. What's this? The official announcement for the Rivera Media Scholarship Foundation. The words hung in the air for a beat too long. Mom blinked. A what? $16 million, I said evenly, dedicated to helping young women in digital media and arts, girls like me, who had potential but no support. It launches tomorrow morning. Logan's face drained of color. 16 million? I nodded. Legally protected in a foundation trust, managed by an independent board. Silence. You could almost hear the air tighten, like the room itself was holding its breath. Mom's eyes filled, not with pride, but panic. You're giving away that kind of money to strangers while your own family is struggling? Struggling, I repeated. You mean the family that's been living off my parents' retirement for years? The family that couldn't even text me on my wedding day? Logan's chair screeched back. You're wasting it. You could help us. I am helping, I said quietly. Just not the way you expected. Dad's voice dropped into a warning growl. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said, meeting his eyes. It makes me free from you. I tapped the document once, the sound sharp and final. That's what real legacy looks like. Not enabling someone who's never learned responsibility, but investing in people who still have a chance to rise. Logan lunged forward, snatching up the page, scanning the text as though he might find a loophole hidden between the lines. This is insane. You can't just... I can, I interrupted. And I have. Dad's voice softened, manipulative, the same tone he used when closing business deals. You're upset. We understand. Let's discuss this calmly. I am calm, I said, for the first time in my life. From my purse, I pulled out my phone and placed it next to the foundation papers. On its screen, the recording app was active 36 minutes and counting. "I've recorded this entire conversation," I said. "Every threat, every guilt trip, every attempt to manipulate me into funding Logan's lifestyle. If any of you try to interfere with the foundation or harass me, this becomes public record." Mom gasped. "Caroline, you wouldn't." "Wouldn't I?" I asked softly. "After 30 years of silence, condescension, and neglect, you think I owe you protection?" Logan's voice cracked. "You're ruining this family." "No, Logan," I said, gathering the document back into my briefcase. "You ruined it when you decided my worth only mattered in dollars." I turned toward the doorway, my heels echoing across the hardwood floor. Behind me, Mom started crying. Dad muttered something about respect. Logan cursed under his breath. I didn't look back. The sunlight from the foyer windows fell across the marble floor, catching the gold on my bracelet, the same one Ethan had given me when I sold my first company. A reminder. You built this. You earned this. I stepped outside, the door closing behind me with a soft final click. It sounded like freedom. The Porsche waited in the driveway, gleaming like a promise. I slid behind the wheel, exhaled once, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I didn't feel anger or sadness, only peace. Because for the first time, I'd stopped trying to be seen and started seeing myself. The night after I left their house, the world was so still it almost felt staged. The air smelled like rain that never came, and my hands still remembered the weight of that briefcase and the sound of the door closing behind me. It hadn't slammed, it had clicked, soft and final, like a signature at the bottom of a chapter I had waited my whole life to end. When I got home, Ethan was sitting on the couch with 2 mugs of tea and that quiet face he wears when he knows I've survived something. He didn't ask right away. He just watched me kick off my heels, watched my shoulders drop as if the armor I'd been wearing finally loosened. When he did speak, his voice was low and steady. He asked how bad it had been. I told him it was exactly what we expected, the same cycle of guilt and entitlement wrapped in the word family. I said they needed money, but what they really wanted was to feel they still had power over me. He asked what I gave them instead, and I told him the truth. He smiled a little, and the silence between us felt like safety. I didn't touch my phone that night, but the buzzing started around midnight. It began with apologies that weren't apologies, the kind that start with "we only meant well." Then came the threats disguised as worry. "You'll regret this, Caroline. Family doesn't turn its back." By 2 a.m., the messages had stacked like a wall of noise. I turned the phone face down and let it buzz against the wood until it stopped. The stillness afterward felt cleaner than any forgiveness ever had. Morning light came pale and slow, sliding across the sheets. Ethan was still asleep beside me, his arm heavy over my waist. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up braced for impact. When I finally checked my phone, there were 6 voicemails, each one a dissent. My mother's voice began soft and trembling, then grew sharp, ending with the brittle tone of someone who believes outrage is a form of love. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you lock from the inside. At the foundation office that afternoon, sunlight pooled across the conference table, as Naomi, my mentor, and the woman who had once believed in my wildest ideas, handed me a printed press release. The board had just approved the final statement, $16 million dedicated to young women in media and arts. The room buzzed with quiet excitement. Someone uncorked sparkling water instead of champagne, because we'd all agreed this wasn't a party, it was a promise. When Naomi looked at me and asked if I was ready for launch, I said yes, and for the first time I meant it without hesitation. The press release went live at 3. Within an hour, my inbox overflowed with messages from journalists, donors, students, and strangers who said they'd cried reading it. My phone vibrated endlessly, but this time, it wasn't guilt calling, it was gratitude. I was still reading one message from a high school teacher in Seattle when Jen, my creative director, knocked on my door. Her face was pale, her voice low. "Your family's downstairs. Security's already talking to them." Through the glass wall, I could see them, my mother waving her arms, her voice sharp and theatrical, my father's face red with something between pride and humiliation. Logan, standing stiff and silent. Every head in the lobby turned toward them. Every whisper carried upward. I told security to escort them out. No scenes, no shouting. Watching them through the reflection of my office window felt strange, almost like watching a memory replay itself from a distance. My mother's voice rose again, muffled by the glass, saying my daughter is abandoning her family. The elevator doors closed on the word family before it reached me. When I turned back to my team, everyone was waiting, unsure whether to keep working. I told them it was handled. I told them to keep going. And they did. No one asked me if I was okay, and I loved them for it. That evening, I sat at my desk long after everyone had gone home. The city outside was gold and quiet, reflected in the windows of the tall buildings like a heartbeat. I opened my laptop and wrote one final message addressed to my parents and my brother. The subject line was a single word: boundaries. I told them I had documented their harassment at my workplace, and that any further contact would have to go through my attorney. The message was short, clean, without anger. When I pressed send, the quiet that followed didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like peace finally making room for itself. 2 days later, my therapist asked how it felt. Necessary, I told her. Not satisfying, just necessary. She said that's what real healing sounds like. She asked if I was angry. I said no, just done. Done being the child who waited to be chosen. Done being the adult who mistook control for care. A week after that, the story hit the news. Logan had gone to a local paper hoping to paint himself as the victim of my cruelty. But truth has a strange way of choosing its side. The article that ran wasn't about his downfall, it was about my foundation, my independence, my refusal to keep a toxic inheritance alive. The headline read, "Self-made founder turns family pain into $16 million legacy for young women." The comments were filled with women thanking me, strangers saying they saw themselves in me. For the first time, my story wasn't about what was taken, it was about what I had built. That night, I stood on the balcony with Ethan. The city glowed below us like a map of every decision I'd ever made. He said I'd changed the story. I told him I hadn't changed it, I'd just stopped letting them write it for me. And for once, that felt enough like victory. The weeks that followed moved softly, as if life itself understood I needed gentleness. The noise from the press faded, replaced by the hum of ordinary days that finally belonged to me. I started each morning the same way. Black coffee, quiet music, sunlight spilling over the hardwood floors of a home that had no ghosts in it. Ethan said the calm suited me, that I no longer looked like someone trying to prove she deserved the air she breathed. I told him calm didn't come naturally. It had to be built, one boundary at a time. At the Crescent Foundation, the world felt alive again. The office walls were lined with photographs of the first scholarship recipients, young women with cameras slung over their shoulders and hope shining behind their exhaustion. They reminded me of myself, though they didn't know it yet. I spent afternoons mentoring them, editing their projects, showing them how to hold the camera steady even when their hands shook. One of them, Maya, was 17 and brilliant, her voice both fragile and fierce. She told me she wanted to make documentaries about the kind of silence that hurts. I told her silence could be transformed if you learned how to frame it right. It had been almost a year since that final confrontation when my parents requested a meeting. The email was short, polite, stripped of guilt but heavy with nostalgia. They wanted coffee. They wanted to talk. Ethan didn't try to convince me either way. He just said, "If you go, go as yourself, not as the daughter they remember." I met them in a small cafe downtown, one I had chosen because it was public, neutral, impossible to turn into a stage. When I walked in, I saw them immediately older, smaller, almost fragile under the soft light. My father's hair had thinned, my mother's posture had surrendered some of its precision. For a moment, I saw not villains but people who had simply built their lives on the wrong kind of love. My father spoke first. He said they should have been at the wedding. He said he was sorry. His voice cracked on the last word, as if it didn't know how to live outside his pride. My mother's eyes filled, but she didn't reach for me. She asked how we could fix it. The question hung there, desperate, impossible. I told them some things couldn't be fixed, only accepted. I said I wasn't closing the door forever, but I needed accountability, not convenience. I told them I'd consider contact again when they were willing to see a therapist together. My father tried to object, but his voice faltered. My mother nodded quickly, then looked down at her cup. We sat in silence until the coffee went cold. When I stood to leave, she whispered my name like a memory she didn't know how to hold. Outside, the air felt clearer. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply walked back to the car and realized that forgiveness wasn't a door you opened for someone else, it was a window you cracked just wide enough to let the light back in. The foundation grew that year, faster than I expected. Maya finished her first documentary, a story about 3 generations of women in a rural Oregon town, and the quiet strength that ran through them. Watching it, I saw pieces of my own life stitched into the fabric of hers. At the premiere, she stood beside me, trembling with nerves, and said I was the reason she believed she could do this. I wanted to tell her that she had it all along, that all I had done was hold up a mirror until she saw herself clearly. A few months later, I was standing on stage again, this time accepting the Community Leadership Award. The lights were warm and soft, not blinding. When I looked out at the audience, I didn't see the empty chairs that used to haunt me. I saw faces that had chosen to be there, Naomi smiling proudly, Ethan in the front row, the scholarship recipients cheering from the back. For the first time in my life, every person in the room saw me, not as someone's daughter or sister, but as myself. In my speech, I told them that my story had begun with invisibility and ended with connection. That sometimes family isn't what you inherit, but what you build when you stop waiting to be seen. The applause that followed didn't sound like validation, it sounded like belonging. Later that night, driving home through Portland's quiet streets, I stopped at a red light and caught a glimpse of my reflection in the car window. For a moment, I saw the woman in the wedding dress again, the one who had walked alone down the aisle, trembling but unbroken. She smiled at me through the glass, and I finally smiled back. When I pulled into our driveway, the house glowed faintly through the trees, warm and full of laughter. Ethan was waiting by the door, and inside, the table was set for dinner with the people we'd gathered along the way. Friends, colleagues, young women whose dreams were just beginning. I stepped inside and realized that love, when it's real, never demands proof. It only asks presence. I looked around at the faces that had become my chosen family, and whispered quietly to myself that I was home.